She was once called too fat to be loved. No one asked her name. No one looked her in the eye. They just looked down at her waist and then away. Every time Martha Tilley walked into the store, the air held its breath as if her presence was what made the place so cramped. But no one knew what they were missing. A pair of hands that always made the softest bread in town. A heart that knew how to sit next to someone who was broken without asking why. And a woman who never repaid evil with anything but quiet kindness. Until one day when the West was ash-filled and no one could remember who had passed by, who a man on horseback appeared. He asked no directions. He brought no flowers. He brought no compliments. Only tired eyes. In a single sentence when she handed him a piece of warm bread, "You're the first person who's looked at me in the eye today." A woman who was once abandoned because of her body. A man carrying a past that no one bothered to ask. A small town where everyone knows your name, but no one wants to sit at the same table with you. And among all the things that no one dared to choose, one of the two spoke first. "I choose you." But can a woman who has been hurt for half her life dare to believe that this feeling is real? Can a man who has wandered for too long stop at a place where there was no place for her? This is not a love story between two young people who found each other at the beginning of their lives. This is a story about people who have lost everything and still choose to stay slowly, gently, fully. And if you've ever felt overlooked, ever thought you weren't suitable for love, ever thought it was too late to be chosen for yourself, then this story is for you. Click follow to see what happens when a woman who no longer believes in miracles becomes a home for those who have nowhere else to go. Do you think she should believe in love again? Comment below. In Dustwell, people didn't whisper behind Martha Tilley's back. They said it out loud. She was always too big for her own good. Strong as a horse, shame about her waist. Pretty eyes wasted on a body like that. She heard it in church pews and store aisles in the way dressmakers sighed when she walked in and in the silence that always followed her laughter. No matter how soft her heart or steady her hands, they always saw her shape first and stopped there. Martha had long given up asking for dresses in her size, or love. At 52, she lived alone on the edge of Dustwell in a leaning cabin with a crooked stovepipe and a cat named Button, who liked her just the way she was, wide hips, soft belly, calloused fingers and all. She worked at the bakery from before sunrise, elbows deep in flour braiding bread, with hands that never once trembled. Her loaves were perfect, but her presence always caused a stir. No one said thank you. They just avoided eye contact and left coins without conversation. She'd been proposed to once, long ago. A man named Ellis Harper, ranch hand light drinker, fast talker. He kissed her once in a hay barn, then never came back. Later, she heard he'd married a woman with a figure that didn't scare the horses. But Martha never folded in on herself. She kept walking to the bakery each day, even when the dust bit her ankles, and the sky looked like it was done trying. She still hummed while she kneaded, still gave the biggest cinnamon roll to the shyest child, still whispered "you're welcome" even when no one said thank you, because kindness, she believed, should never depend on being wanted. And then one dry morning in early September, a man rode into town. Not fast, not proud, just slow and deliberate, like someone who'd been carrying silence for a long time. He wore a travel-stained coat and a wide hat that shaded tired eyes. At his hip, a rusted canteen. Across his back, a guitar missing strings. No one paid him mind, but Martha saw him. She stepped outside the bakery, brushed flour from her apron and said, "If you need a cool drink or a place to sit, I don't mind." He looked at her, not past her, not around her, at her, and for the first time in years, someone didn't look surprised by her size. He didn't speak right away, but after a moment, he tipped his hat and said, "You're the first person who's looked me straight in the eye today." Then added, "I reckon I'll sit if you don't mind the quiet." And Martha, full-bodied, full-hearted Martha, said simply, "I've been waiting for the quiet to stay a while." They said she was too big to be wanted, but he didn't flinch, didn't laugh, didn't look away. And that somehow was the beginning of everything. Martha didn't expect to see him again. Strangers passed through Dustwell the way wind passed through dry grass, briefly without apology. Most men came for the saloon or a supply stop. Fewer stayed past dusk. None ever came back for her. But 2 days after offering him a drink and a shaded place to rest, she heard hoofbeats outside the bakery. Not hurried, not lost, deliberate. He stepped off his horse with the same quiet gravity she remembered. Same coat, same guitar strapped to his back, though now he carried a small burlap sack slung over one shoulder. He nodded at her through the bakery window, and for a second she thought it must be a mistake. Then he opened the door, paused just past the threshold, and said, "You didn't tell me your name." Martha wiped her hands on her apron and blinked slowly. "Most don't ask," she said. "I'm not most," he replied. There was no flirtation in his voice, no shine in his eye, just gentleness, the kind you only learn after life has taken something from you and left you quieter in return. "Martha," she said finally. "Martha Tilly." He nodded as if filing it away for safekeeping. "I'm Walker, just Walker." He gave a small smile. "For now." She made coffee without asking. He accepted a seat near the stove. They didn't speak much, only small exchanges about whether flour shipments and whether molasses cost more this year. But silence between them didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Walker visited every morning after that. Sometimes he helped carry sacks of grain. Sometimes he fixed the latch on the bakery door that no one else bothered with. He never asked for anything, never lingered past noon, but always he looked her in the eyes. And that alone made her feel seen. One afternoon, Martha found a note tucked under a jar of dried ginger on the back counter. It wasn't signed. "You're the first person who makes the quiet feel like home." She kept that scrap of paper inside the same cookbook where she'd once pressed a wedding invitation that never got sent. But nothing good in Dustwell went unnoticed for long. One morning, two women from town stood outside the bakery, pretending to admire the flour box. "Heard she's got a man now," one said. "A drifter," the other added. "Must not know what he's getting into." Martha heard every word, didn't flinch, didn't cry. But when she turned, Walker was standing in the doorway, jaw set not in anger but in understanding. "You hear that?" she asked him quietly. "I hear a lot of things," he replied, but only one voice ever mattered in this place. He looked straight at her. "Yours." That night he stayed late, helped her sweep flour off the floor, then sat with her at the little wooden table near the stove. They didn't speak for a long while. Then he said, "I've been running for most of my life, Martha. But when you said my name this morning, I didn't want to keep going." She didn't say anything in return, but she refilled his coffee, slid him the last biscuit from the tin, and let herself sit a little closer than yesterday. He came back for her name. Not to fix her, not to flatter her, just to know her. And for a woman who'd spent a lifetime overlooked, that was everything. The mornings had begun to cool, but the gossip in Dustwell only warmed. By the time the second frost kissed the pumpkin patch outside Martha's cabin, the town had already decided it knew too much about the situation at the bakery. Walker still came by every morning, still carried flour sacks like they weighed nothing, still checked the back steps for wood rot, and brought her coffee with a drop more cream than she asked for. And Martha, for the first time in years, started humming again while she worked. But contentment has a way of drawing shadows when it dares to show its face. It started small little pauses in conversations when Martha walked into the general store. A sideways glance from Mrs. Crawley, who once praised her cinnamon rolls but now picked up her bread with pinched fingers and no words. Then came the note slipped beneath the bakery door in blocky, uneven handwriting. "He's only being kind. Don't embarrass yourself." Martha read it once, folded it neatly, threw it in the stove without flinching. But the heat that rose in her chest wasn't just from the fire. That night, while folding aprons in the dim lamplight, she asked, "Do you ever feel like people are just waiting for you to fall?" Walker didn't look up from where he was repairing a broken chair leg. "People who never dared to stand hate the ones who try," he said simply, then added, "You've stood longer than most." But doubt has its own gravity, and after decades of being too big, too plain, and too much to handle, Martha found herself flinching at her own reflection. She'd been fine alone. She'd built a life out of quiet routines and unspoken strength. Was this too close to hope? 2 days later, she overheard Reverend Amesley talking to a rancher out by the well. "Generosity's one thing," he said, "but living sin under the guise of loneliness, that's another." They never said her name. They didn't have to. That evening, Walker found her in the bakery's back room, sitting on a flour sack, face turned toward the wall. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," she said. "To stay," no, Martha whispered, "to believe someone could see all of me and not look away." Walker crouched down in front of her, gently, slowly. "I'm not here to fix you," he said. "I'm not here to prove anything to anyone. I just know that every morning you give the best of yourself, whether anyone sees it or not. And that kind of goodness," he touched his chest. "It's the kind a man notices." She didn't reply, but she reached for his hand, held it like a warm stone on a cold night, and didn't let go. But outside, Dustwell's wind was picking up. So were the whispers, and not everyone liked what was growing between the woman they'd dismissed and the man who'd come from nowhere. For the first time in her life, someone saw her completely and stayed. But when a woman like Martha Tilley begins to believe she is lovable, not everyone in town is ready for the light she carries. The days were growing shorter, and the light that remained turned gold before it slipped away. It was the kind of light Martha Tilley remembered from her childhood, soft, forgiving, like the sky was trying to say it was sorry for all the things that went unsaid. She stood at the edge of her garden apron, dusted in flour, the hem of her dress damp from the well pump. Behind her, the bakery windows glowed. In front of her, the town waited, its eyes narrowing as her back straightened. That morning, Walker had handed her something small, folded, worn at the corners, a piece of parchment, almost brittle. "Was going to show you later," he said, "but now feels right." She unfolded it with care. A church registry, Wyoming Territory, 15 years ago. And there in faded ink, Walker Elijah Kane, widowed. No children, no claim on land. "I've run from a lot of places," he said quietly, "but not because I did anything wrong. Just couldn't carry the weight people put on me." He paused, met her eyes. "I see how they talk about you, Martha. I've lived that weight, but it doesn't belong to you." Never did. That afternoon, she baked 6 loaves of honey rye and laid them out on the bakery counter. Then she wrote a note and pinned it to the front door. "If you've ever felt too much or not enough, come by after sundown. There's bread, there's quiet, there's room." They came slowly at first. Mrs. Green, who hadn't spoken to her in 5 years. Eli Densmore, the blacksmith's boy with the stutter. Joan Whiteley, the widow who used to avoid eye contact but now brought a jar of jam as an offering. They didn't say much, but they stayed. Martha wore her apron with pride that night, the one with the torn strap she never bothered to fix because it still held. Walker stood beside her as she ladled warm cider into tin cups. Not as a protector, not as a man claiming her, just there. And when someone asked how long he'd be in town, he answered, "Long as she'll have me." Later, after the last lanterns dimmed, Martha sat on the steps with her shoes off, skirt bunched at her knees. She looked out over the town that once shamed her and said almost to herself, "I never needed them to love me. I just needed them to stop acting like I didn't exist." Walker handed her a biscuit wrapped in cloth. "No one can erase what they did," he said. "But you rewrote the ending." She leaned against his shoulder, full in body, full in breath. And for the first time in her life, she felt the heaviness lift not from her frame, but from her name. Martha Tilley, wanted, welcomed, still whole. They gave her shame like a gift. She gave it back without apology. And what she carried now was her own. The frost came quiet that morning. Martha Tilley noticed it first on the edges of the bakery windows, little white ferns blooming across the glass. She pressed her palm against one, not to clear it, but to feel it, to remind herself that things can be cold and beautiful at the same time. Behind her, Walker was stoking the fire. He moved slow in the mornings, like someone who knew the day would be heavy, but wasn't afraid of the weight. They had fallen into a rhythm. No big declarations, no signed promises, just the quiet things, her coffee cup always full before she asked. His coat always hung next to hers even when he was out late. A loaf wrapped in cloth, set aside with his name stitched on the tag. People still whispered in town, but fewer looked away. Some began stopping by the bakery just to sit. Not to talk, just to be. Martha had started leaving a second chair out front. It was never empty long. One night after cleaning up, she found Walker out back staring up at the sky. "You ever think," she asked, "you'd settle somewhere again?" He looked over at her. "I didn't think I'd be wanted long enough to try." She laughed, a small, raspy sound. "Well, I'm not fast, but I last." He stepped closer. "I don't want to be just passing through, Martha." She held his gaze steady as her hands kneading dough. "Then don't." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple silver band. It wasn't shiny, it wasn't new, But it was his, and he held it out with both hands, voice low. You're the first one I've ever chosen for real. Not because I needed help, not because I was lonely, but because with you, I feel like I can stop running. Martha didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She just stepped forward, placed her hands over his and whispered, then stop. And he did. Right there under the frostbit stars where two people who had lived too long in silence let themselves be kept not out of duty, but choice. She wore the ring like she wore everything else without apology. And when people asked what he saw in her, Walker always answered the same, she's steady, she's real, and she's the only place I've ever felt like I could set my heart down. After a lifetime of being overlooked, she wasn't finally chosen. Despite her body, she was chosen because of her soul. It snowed on the first Sunday of December. Not much, just a dusting enough to quiet the roads and soften the fences. Enough to hush the town without taking its breath. Inside the bakery, Martha Tilley kneaded sweetbread by lantern light. Walker was out chopping wood and the stove ticked with that low-content kind of heat. In the window, a holly branch bent toward the glass as if listening, and that's when she heard it. A knock. Small, unsure. She opened the door to find a girl no more than 20 with shoes worn through at the soles and a coat 2 sizes too thin. She wasn't crying, but her silence was heavy. I heard there was bread, the girl said. There is, Martha replied, stepping aside. And heat, and chairs that don't ask questions. They fed her first. Let her rest on the bench by the stove tucked beneath the same quilt Walker once used when he first arrived. Later that night, the girl whispered, my aunt used to tell me about a bakery run by a woman who didn't flinch, even when people laughed, even when they lied. Martha smiled. Then your aunt knew her. They didn't ask what the girl ran from, but they made room. Walker added another hook beside the back door. Martha pulled down an old apron and stitched a flower along the edge. By morning, the girl was folding parchment and learning how to glaze. Word began to spread. Quietly, like all good things do. A boy left behind by his father showed up next, too proud to ask for help, until Martha handed him a bowl of soup and said, eat first. We'll talk later. A woman from a nearby ranch brought canned peaches one morning and simply sat on the porch. Said nothing. Came back the next day and brought a story. Dustwell didn't change all at once, but the silence around Martha did. People began waving when they passed. Some dropped off firewood. Others just sat a while. One afternoon, Walker carved a sign and hung it just above the bakery door. This place doesn't flinch. Warm bread, steady hearts. And when Martha saw it, she didn't say a word. Just touched the wood gently and whispered, I never wanted a monument. Just a place that remembered what I gave, not what I lacked. Walker leaned in close. You built that. You didn't wait for someone else to. That night, she wrote a note and left it by the front window. To anyone still carrying shame like a second skin, come sit by the fire. We have room. Her love didn't end in romance. It grew into shelter, into stillness, into something others could rest inside. And isn't that the best kind of healing? By late winter, the roads to Dustwell were nearly impassable. The snow came thick and honest, no longer polite in its approach. The kind of snow that slowed horses, silenced gossip, and blanketed rooftops like forgiveness. Inside the bakery, warmth hummed from the oven like a steady heart. Martha Tilley stood by the window with a dish towel in her hands, watching a group of children press their palms to the frosted glass. They didn't want anything, not really. They just liked to see her smile back. A letter came that morning, from a town 2 days north, carried by a traveler who'd once slept on the bakery floor. It wasn't addressed to anyone in particular, but Walker handed it to Martha without a word. Inside it read, I heard about your place. My sister came home and said she was seen. Not fixed, not pitied, just seen. Thank you. Martha folded the letter and placed it beside her cookbooks, the same ones she once kept closed out of shame. They were worn now, smudged with flour, alive. That spring, when the first thaw broke the last patch of snow, Walker built a bench beneath the cotton tree. He carved one word into the seat rail. Stayed. When Martha saw it, she didn't ask for more. She just sat there each afternoon after baking hands folded in her lap apron dusted with sweet spice. Sometimes someone would sit beside her, sometimes not. But the bench never stayed empty long. One warm evening, Reverend Amesley, who once spoke harshly about her, came to the door with a jar of honey and eyes that looked heavier than before. "My wife's been gone 6 months," he said. "I heard this place helps." Martha didn't speak. She just opened the door wider. They say now that if you arrive in Dustwell near dusk and follow the smell of cardamom bread, you'll find a place that doesn't ask your history first. You'll be given a seat and maybe a blanket. You'll be offered warmth before explanation. And someone, often a woman in a flour-dusted apron, will hand you a cup of tea and ask very simply, "Are you tired?" Because she knows what it means to carry weight that isn't yours. To be named for your body before your kindness. To be too big for small hearts. And more than anything, Martha Tilley knows how to build a table long enough for others to stop running. Walker still rises early, still brews the coffee, still hums a low song while mending fence posts. But now he sometimes watches her from the porch and thinks, she's not just the first one I chose. She's the reason I stayed. They called her too fat to be wanted. But she built a life too full to be ignored. And when they left her behind, she made room for the ones still coming. There are people who spend their whole lives looking at other people's backs. They are not asked, they are not chosen, they are not kept. Like Martha Tilley called too fat to be loved but never stop being kind. Then a man appears, not to fix her, not to save her, just to look at her with the eyes she has been waiting for her whole life, the eyes that do not avoid. They have no grand wedding, no farewell song. Just a cup of tea, a loaf of cake, a nod, and two people choose to stay. And perhaps the lesson here is not in the grand ending, but in the small things. Someone who once thought he was not enough can still become a place others call home. If this story touches you, subscribe to the channel None. Wild West Saga. We tell the old stories in a gentle voice. For those who still believe true love is never too late. What do you think? Would you like to see a sequel or another story just as gentle? Share and comment. We're listening and waiting to tell you more when you're ready.